Thank you all for joining us from around the world. It is really wonderful to see you here today. I am Sajida Shroff, and I am privileged to serve as president of GlobalWE. Harvard GlobalWE is a shared interest group, or SIG, of the Harvard Alumni Association. We are dedicated to the empowerment of women through education, dialogue, and connection among individuals working for women's rights and freedoms worldwide. We highlight and raise awareness about issues concerning women's empowerment worldwide, including, but not limited to, education, political rights, freedom from violence, women's health, and economic empowerment. Our board of directors is as global as our interests, with representatives in the US, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. In fact, I'm Canadian, but currently live in Dubai. Our programs director, Arthi, lives in India. Our treasurer, President-elect Leah, is in Chicago, and our secretary, Janina, who's actually getting married today, is now based out of San Francisco. Our marketing chair, Kendall, is in St. Louis. Our Connect chair, Barbara, is also in the Chicago area. Our outreach chairs, Recep and Rebecca, are based in Turkey and Singapore, respectively. Our membership chair, Corinne, is based in Cleveland. Our essay contest chair and founder, Julie, is based in the Chicago area. And of course, our student groups are based out of Cambridge. Normally, even as a team, we come together and meet up at least once a year, but we haven't been able to do so since we last met up in February 2020. I am pleased to say, however, that we have kept the flag flying very high. It was in fact during our 2020 retreat that we formalized the Connect concept to innovate one of our flagship events, the GlobalWE Expo. Connect is one of GlobalWE's newer initiatives that has emerged very strongly during the COVID-19 pandemic, thanks to an amazing team. Connect is designed to bring members of the Harvard University community and friends together with organizations leading the way globally for women's empowerment in the arts, social services, education, health, economic development, entrepreneurship, policy, STEM, and other fields. We are very proud of the work that the Connect team has done, from launching the Fireside Chat series in 2021 to organizing a virtual Women's Empowerment Expo for the past 2 years. The Expo events have featured nearly 50 organizations leading the way for women's empowerment. You can learn more about GlobalWE Connect and the Expo by visiting our website and YouTube channel. If this is your first GlobalWE event, very, very welcome. For attendees who have joined us before, a huge welcome back. We are really excited to have everyone here. We value your engagement and support. Remember, we are a 501c3, so any donations will be tax-free and of course, very welcome. Donations can be made by clicking on the Donate tab on our website at harvardglobalwe.org, where you can donate using a credit card or find the information on how to donate by check. Let's take a quick moment to take a screenshot, so please turn your cameras on if you are comfortable having your picture shared by our GlobalWE social media. Is everyone ready? Brandon and Anna, please take the screenshot.
Okay. I think I've got it.
Thank you so much. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Brooke Hutchinson, Executive Director of CAMFED USA, as our third Fireside Chat speaker. Since its founding in 1993, CAMFED catalyzes the power of the most vulnerable girls and young women to create the future they imagine for themselves, for their communities, and for Africa. First, Brooke will deliver remarks, followed by a moderated Q&A session led by GlobalWE member Wendy Barreno. There will also be an opportunity for attendees to ask questions. As a reminder, this event is being recorded, and the recording will be shared on GlobalWE's social media platforms. We request you now to please turn off your videos and mute your microphones if you have not already done so. We hope that you enjoy today's discussion and become a member or friend of GlobalWE. I would like to share some background information about our speaker before she begins. Brooke Hutchinson joined CAMFED, the Campaign for Female Education, in July 2004 and went on to establish CAMFED USA's office in San Francisco in 2006, where she now serves as Executive Director. She was motivated to work in the field of girls' education after studying in Kenya and conducting research on child growth stunting in the Gambia, witnessing firsthand the direct impact of mothers' education levels on child and family health. Brooke holds a BA in anthropology and biology from the University of Colorado and an MPhil in biological anthropology from the University of Cambridge. Brooke, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sajida, and thank you to everyone who's joining us this morning or this afternoon or this evening. I saw where everyone is coming from, so we've got a range of time zones, and just thank you so much to Harvard GlobalWE, because we have been looking forward to this conversation. I'm really pleased to be representing CAMFED on behalf of my colleagues globally. So I think that what I'm going to speak about today, just share about what CAMFED's learned over the last 3 decades, will be really close to the heart of everyone here who cares about women's empowerment, because we really do look at girls' education, as I'll speak about, as kind of the entry point to fighting injustices that girls and women face globally. And we focus on Africa, but it's certainly lessons and learning that can be taken and applied across the world. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I do hope that that is working and you can see the slides that I'm sharing. So just to, as Sajida said, campaign stands for the Campaign for Female Education. And we started in 1993 in Zimbabwe, supporting 32 girls through school. You'll get a chance to meet one of those women, and are really about helping girls to learn, thrive, and lead change. So we're a Pan-African movement. We work in 5 countries in Africa. I'll share a little bit more about that. And we're really about the how of girls' education, because as time has gone on since our founding, girls' education has been increasingly recognized as a key issue for some of the global challenges that I'll mention on the next slide. But we're about how you get girls in school, how they can thrive when they're there, and how they can be successful as young educated women and leaders once they leave school. So why girls' education? As I said, we really see it as the entry point to systemic change. It has been recognized globally as one of the most powerful things you can do if you want to have an impact on any of the global challenges that we all want to be able to solve. So if you think about women's leadership, obviously women being able to take up positions of leadership and help to change the systems in which they may serve isn't going to happen if they don't have the opportunity to go to school. If we think about social justice, girls' education is the starting point for addressing so many of the injustices that we see in the communities where CAMFED works in rural Africa, but also around the world. So exclusion from education leads to later gender inequality, gender-based violence, child marriage, greater rates of HIV and AIDS, lower rates of employment. So really, it can all start in terms of change with girls' education. When we think about climate action, this is something that wasn't something we would necessarily highlight in terms of the impact of girls' education previously. But today, it's obviously right at the front of our minds, and Africa is at the forefront of those communities experiencing the impact of climate change. So with girls' education, there can be healthier, better educated, and more financially secure families. Women's leadership can not only operate in some of the other bodies I mentioned, but also in really leading sustainable low carbon pathways to prosperity. And also they can help to improve the adaptation and resilience of their communities to the effects of climate change. And finally, in terms of economic development, women who have completed secondary school earn 2 times more income than those who haven't, and women reinvest 90% of their income into their families. So when you give women the opportunity to earn a safe and secure living, it's going to benefit everyone. So this is really how we see our work. It's a virtuous cycle. It's a long-term journey in partnership with girls. First, supporting them to progress through and succeed in primary school. Then a real focus of ours is at the secondary school level, ensuring that where girls drop off most rapidly, that they have the opportunity not only to attend school, to but to be supported, to be successful. Then they transition, and this is a really key part of CAMFED's work, supporting this transition from school into a productive livelihood, because it can be a really vulnerable period for girls where they've achieved this incredible accomplishment of having been some of the first in their communities to have completed secondary school, but to be able to turn that into a livelihood, to turn that into independence and being able to make choices requires additional support and partnership. And with all of this investment, then young women really step up as leaders and multiply education opportunities for the next generation. And I'll talk about what that looks like in hard numbers in terms of CAMFED's alumni. So in terms of how we operate, we're accountable to the girl. So first and foremost, she is our client. She is at the center of everything that we do. And there's really, as I'll talk about, a little ecosystem around her of CAMFED as an organization, of CAMFED champions within her community, and finally, and most importantly, of young women who have walked that road, who have been supported to go to school, who were once excluded, and who can now be the guides both to us as an organization and to the girls themselves. So those three components that I mentioned, it really is kind of a three-legged stool. So we've got the CAMFED Association at the helm. That is our alumni network, much like this network of young women who have been supported through school by CAMFED and now organize on behalf of other girls and young women in their communities. We've got CAMFED champions. So this is really anyone in a community that touches a girl's life can have an impact on her experience. So it can be head teachers, of course, it's parents. It's also officials from other ministries besides the Ministry of Education that can have an impact, like the Ministry of Social Justice and in some communities, ministries serving women, looking at health, the police and support that can come from there. So it's that whole ecosystem of support that we build around girls. And finally, CAMFED operations. So this is the CAMFED organization, really there to come behind these other two bodies, to be able to create partnerships, of course, bring in funding, and really be responsive to the needs of our clients. So in terms of where we work in over 6,700 partner schools in 5 countries. So Ghana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Tanzania. And when we talk about being led by young women, what does that mean? So CAMFED's leadership model is one that believes that those who have experienced the problem themselves are the best place to drive the solution. So many of our senior executives are former CAMFED students, and a third of CAMFED staff globally are made up of alumni. So you can see here, and you're going to meet Angeline on the left in a little more detail in just a second. She was one of the first 32 girls that I mentioned that was supported through school when we began in 1993 in Zimbabwe. So she received that support through secondary school to complete her education. And when she completed her education, along with many of her colleagues in 1998, there was that question of what next? And so that's the middle picture, is them actually forming the CAMFED Association. You can see Angie in the very top middle. And so that what next was really a way for CAMFED to continue to invest in these young women, as I was mentioning, as they make that transition, but also for them to stay connected with each other. And that was really critical, that peer support that they could have, that they had built at school and that they wanted to maintain going forward. And so the evidence is that this works. You know, this is the way to work in terms of really putting power and decision making and resources in the hands of young women who have, as I said, had that experience of exclusion, had that experience of transformation through education, and can now lead the work in terms of scaling up the number of girls that we're supporting, but also having an impact on the wider education system to make sure that it works for the most vulnerable children. So this has taken us from the first 32 girls in 1993 to 5.6 million children having been supported by CAMFED's programs. And the core of this work is to catalyze the power of the most vulnerable girls and young women to create the future that they imagine. And so I'll just take a moment now to introduce you. I wish you could be here alongside me, but the timing was a little tricky. And so to just introduce you to Angie, our Executive Director for Africa, who, as I mentioned, was one of the first girls supported through school, and now co-leads the organization with our CEO as our Executive Director there. And she was recently profiled by CNN, and so that's the video I'm going to show. Just a moment, see if we can get this to work.
No. What led to this vote?
Let's see. Excuse me.
I think it was
It went ahead to the next video, Brooke, on YouTube.
my homework is about things that we felt could be improved, like policies that
I will just cue it back up. Apologies. This will work. It's worth the wait. Angie is. It's worth hearing firsthand. Okay, trying again. And I think it'll play an ad just to mention, so just take 1 second.
It's out of this world. For the whole year, dial *777#.
Angeline Murmiwa promotes girls' education across Africa through the Campaign for Female Education, or CAMFED.
We provide the financial support, the social support, and the community support for those girls who get places to go to secondary school to be able to proceed. We've supported over 5 million girls through school. Our strategic plan up to 2025 is to support 5 million more through school.
For Angeline, the organization's work is personal. She understands all too well what it's like to struggle to stay in school.
I was born by poor parents, subsistence farmers who didn't have enough to eat, let alone invest in my education.
Angeline was one of the first young women to receive support from CAMFED.
It was clear that I wasn't ready to proceed to secondary school. So when CAMFED selected me, the fact that I had school fees guaranteed, I had all school going costs guaranteed, for me, I was hopeful.
Today, she's meeting with several women in Malawi who graduated school with CAMFED's help.
So are you going to take us in? Yes. Charity is a CAMFED Association member, and she's an entrepreneur. She sells fabrics, materials, laces, and just now I'm buying my own fabric so that I can do my children, right?
I decided to employ my fellow CAMFED Association member as one way of encouraging sisterhood. My greatest vision is to transform these fabric services place to be the tailoring service.
Other members have chosen to go back to their former schools as learner guides to mentor students.
We understand that it's not enough for a child just to walk through the school gates and to just meet their school uniforms or their school needs. It's also important for learners to have social support to be able to navigate school and home life for them to be able to make a success. And this is led by our learner guides, and our social support is to all students, both boys and girls. Because for us, it's important for students to learn, stay in school, and succeed. For every girl out there, poor or not, struggling or not, you matter. You are important. You have an opportunity to be able to make this world a better place. There's only one you, and the world needs you in this time, in this generation. Be you, and you always have a cheerleader in you.
So hopefully that was a little bit of a window in to Angie and to what it's like when she returns to a school. You know, because she's able to say, I was once in your shoes and share details of her experience. So she, you know, that's incredibly powerful, as I'm sure everyone can appreciate, for her to be able to talk about when she was vulnerable, when she was on the brink of dropping out because her parents felt very passionately about education, but just didn't have the resources to be able to support all of their children through school. And then what she's doing now, you know, as the leader of a global organization, a Pan-African organization that's supporting more children. And yeah, to be able to see that is so powerful for the students coming up, for her fellow alumni. You can imagine what that's like. So just as a few final slides, and then I know we've got some wonderful questions that I'm looking forward to answering, but let me go ahead and talk through a final couple of notes before that. So as I mentioned, you know, we have the numbers in terms of the education work and then the post-school work. So 33,000 graduates starting businesses, 75,000 graduates stepping into leadership positions, including in their communities and beyond. So there's elected officials who are CAMFED Association members, for example, or in government positions who are able, as I said, to have an impact at the system level. And there's over 208,000 CAMFED Association members now across our 5 countries of operation. So in terms of where we go from here, as Angie mentioned, we have a 5-year strategic plan that we're in the midst of that started in 2021. We want to support 5 million girls to attend and thrive in school, help 50,000 young women transition into productive businesses, create 150,000 new jobs, and grow the CAMFED Association to 280,000 women leaders. So how are we going to do this? It's all about this multiplier effect. So the fact that for every girl that CAMFED supports through school, she in turn supports on average 3 more girls through school. And in fact, as we go through our strategic plan period, we're seeing that number increase from an average of 3 to an average of 5. So that's the sustainability of working in this way, you know, that you make that initial investment, it's the right kind of holistic support so that girls get the most out of that education that you're investing in, and then they become the leaders, they become the philanthropists who are supporting the next generation through school. And so, as I said, you know, it's really about systemic change. It starts with girls' education, then you've got the young women leaders in their communities and in their countries and on the global stage, and then thinking about systemic change. So how does the school system overall work better for the most marginalized girls? And if it works better for the most marginalized girls, it's going to work better for everyone. And in terms of just the recognition, I think that CAMFED as an organization is getting, but also, which we're thrilled about, that girls' education more broadly is getting. In 2021 alone, we were honored with the Conrad Hilton Humanitarian Prize, with the Yidan Prize, which is the world's largest education prize, and the Princess of Asturias Award, which really focused again on that kind of sustainable, systemic approach that CAMFED takes. So that is it as an introduction for me, and just looking forward to a discussion and questions.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for that really wonderful presentation and walking us through, you know, the breadth and depth of everything that CAMFED is doing, as well as, you know, really how it got started and why it got started, which was, I think, also very powerful. And the video was beautiful. It was so touching to see the girls and to see, you know, the environment, and but also to see this person who really was, you know, brought up by CAMFED in a real way. So thank you also for sharing the various interesting, you know, the various areas of focus, because I never really thought about climate change as a key area when you think about the work at CAMFED, but obviously it makes so much sense given the way the world is today. As someone who grew up in Kenya, actually, and who works in the education sector, I'm really well aware of the importance of educating girls for society as a whole, and can only applaud the work of CAMFED and everything that you do, and also how you do it, in terms of the engagement and the approach you take to be contextual and respectful of the communities that you work with. So thank you so much for, again, sharing all of the information with us. I would now like to introduce GlobalWE member Wendy Barreno, who will moderate a question and answer session with Brooke. Wendy leads growth and innovation at the Worker Education and Resource Center, a nonprofit organization that connects historically disenfranchised workers to quality jobs with top rate wages and benefits, healthy and supportive work environments, and meaningful opportunities for career advancement, while also providing capacity building to employer partners to increase equity in the labor force. Wendy has worked as a senior staff member and consultant in government, nonprofits, philanthropy, and the private sector. She holds a bachelor's degree from Harvard University and a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School, where she was awarded the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy Paper Prize. Wendy, thank you so much again for joining us as moderator. Over to you.
Thank you, Sajida. And thank you again, Brooke, for joining us today. I am excited to be among the group here to welcome you and to thank you for the work that you do as a leader at CAMFED. I'd like to start off by asking about learner guides, something that Angeline highlighted in the videos. Could you tell us a little bit more about these learner guides and why they are so important to girls and women's success?
Absolutely. And I love to talk about the learner guides because it's the perfect example of kind of the operational model of what I described about young women going back and supporting the next generation. So learner guides are young women who are supported by CAMFED through school, who graduate secondary school, and then have the opportunity to go back into their local secondary school as a guide to the students. And they use a curriculum that was developed in partnership with the CAMFED Association members called My Better World. And it's focused on social skills and critical thinking. It really is meant to be a complement to the academic learning because, as I mentioned, what CAMFED wants to ensure is that girls not only are able to attend school, but they're able to thrive and get a quality education. And that social support alongside the financial support that we provide is so critical. And so it's not only an opportunity for the students, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the data showing that they do much better with this support, but it's also an opportunity for the young women themselves. So it gives them something, to kind of fill that transition period that I mentioned, while they might be thinking about higher education, they might be thinking about going into business. And many young women through the Learner Guide program get a qualification that allows them to more easily transition into teacher training, which is really important, not only as an opportunity for them, but also it ensures that more female teachers are coming through in the school system, and in particular, young women who are from the rural areas. So they, again, can really identify with and support students who are coming from similar backgrounds. And so just to talk a little bit about why we see that this works and why we have the evidence to show that that's the case. We did an extensive external evaluation of the Learner Guide program in Tanzania and Zimbabwe, and found that it improved learning outcomes, particularly for marginalized girls, and literacy and numeracy more than doubled for the girls being reached. And so again, even though it's really focused on those social skills, those critical thinkings, that self-esteem, it actually improved their academic performance. It also improved their attendance, it reduced school dropout rates, and it enhanced their self-belief, the idea that they're positive about the future. So the kind of impact is clear, both for the students and for the young women themselves.
That's wonderful. I think it's really interesting that there are 3 levels of benefits to the girl in school who is able to receive the mentoring and social support, to the graduates who are able to receive the credential or the certificate, and systemically by using this as a pathway to integrate more women into leadership roles as teachers in the community. So that's really interesting concept. And thinking about CAMFED's approach broadly, I know that your work begins with an invitation from a country's national government. So I'd love to know why you decided on this approach and how you get these government invitations.
Absolutely. So I love this question because I think we don't get as much of an opportunity to talk about our government partnerships, and they are so central to our work because, as you said, the only way we start working in a country is at the invitation of the Ministry of Education in that country. And so we started in Zimbabwe and then have kind of expanded into each of the additional 4 countries in that same way. And we established a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Education, which sets out, how CAMFED is there to help, what we're there to support, because ultimately we're there to invest in the existing school system, not to set up some kind of parallel structure. And so it's about partnership first and foremost, and making sure that, for example, when we're determining which districts CAMFED is going to focus on, because we do look to work in the most marginalized communities, those where there's obviously the greatest exclusion of girls from school, we make those decisions in partnership with the ministry because they have programs that are running focused on girls' education. There's other non-governmental organizations working in the country that we also want to be coordinated with. So we don't want to duplicate each other's work. We really want to be stronger as a community of organizations and institutions focused on girls' education. And so not only does this, I think, help us, like I said, strengthen that system from the beginning, but it also allows us to have a broader impact than CAMFED's work directly. So even though we might work specifically in certain districts and certain schools, we've had CAMFED's wider model taken up. So for example, in Zambia, our child protection policy has been adopted by the Ministry of Education and spread across all schools in Zambia. So that's an impact that we're having beyond where we work directly. And in Tanzania, we've been working really closely with the Ministry of Education over the last couple of years to explore taking a learner guide program beyond the districts where CAMFED works and engaging young women who aren't CAMFED alumni in doing that same work, going back into their local schools. So we really see the partnerships with the government as central to having this broader systemic change. And I just mentioned, I think you summarized the learner guide impact so powerfully, and what you said about the third piece in the systemic impact, it's not just benefiting the marginalized girls. What we're also seeing, and what I didn't read from the data that I was quoting, is that the broader school community is doing better. So students who aren't even being supported by CAMFED, you also see an impact there. So it is the case that kind of a rising tide lifts all boats, and that all students are going to do better when you have an environment that's supporting the most vulnerable.
Absolutely. It sounds like there are a lot of ripple effects that come out of the partnership with the Ministry of Education, and also the aspect of it really being a locally driven approach that makes sense for each of the countries and each of the communities within those countries that you work in. I know that once CAMFED starts implementing its model, that it's a highly collaborative process, which probably enables those ripple effects, right? And those other benefits that come out of working at the national level. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that collaborative model. I know you have local committees, you have CAMFED operations, which includes offices in Africa, as well as Canada, the US, the UK. And then, of course, the network of young women, you mentioned the CAMFED Association. So would love to hear a little bit more about how those different stakeholders collaborate together and why that model of collaboration is so powerful.
Absolutely. So starting with the CAMFED champions, our model in terms of the actual scholarship program at the secondary school level looks very similar. Of course, it's evolved and grown over the years, but to where we started, because the fundamental idea was that the community knows who the most vulnerable children are. They know who might be on the brink of dropping out of school, who may have already dropped out of school. And so first and foremost, having community level committees who make decisions about which girls are going to be supported is so critical, and that it's this transparent process. It's not managed by one person, but it's something that the criteria are made public in terms of how marginality is determined, the number of children that can be supported that year. And so what it shows is that not only is that the right way to do it, because that actually is how you end up supporting the most marginalized girls, but then what it does is it really galvanizes broader support. So the community, what we've seen, has seen that, okay, CAMFED's bringing in these resources. This is how many girls they have the resources to be able to support this year. And we can support these additional children through our activities. And so there's mother support groups and father support groups that have been built up at the partner schools where we work that, for example, provide school feeding programs, because they recognize that CAMFED might be meeting the financial costs of going to school, but the students might be struggling in terms of food security. And so it's really about like complementing each other's work. And then as the CAMFED Association has grown from that first 400 young women in 1998 to 208,000 young women, they've just taken over. Like they're at the absolute forefront of the work. And so what that means in the numbers is that if we look at our numbers from 2021, CAMFED through donor funds supported 250,497 girls through school. The community champions supported 454,511 children through school. And the CAMFED Association supported 590,087 children through school. So what that shows is that our support as an organization is being outstripped now by our alumni, by the community champions. And obviously, you know, that's a much more sustainable model than perennially being dependent on donor funds. And so it's that multiplier effect. It's that, you know, partnership model that we believe is really the key to solving what is a very large problem. I mean, there's 52 million girls across sub-Saharan Africa out of school. So we recognize that as an organization, we're not going to be able to support them all. So it really is going to take this movement. And that's what we've built with this three-pronged approach.
That is a huge magnitude of impact that you just described. So I know that must be very exciting. And I love that you have community wisdom about both the needs in the community and the most impactful ways to address those needs at the center and core of the model. And, you know, as a final question before we transition into audience questions, I would love to think about the scale that you were talking about, both just now, but also during your presentation. I think going from 32 girls in 1993 to over 5.5 million that you're serving now. You mentioned your strategic plan and really wanting to grow the CAMFED Association of Women Leaders, I think to over 280,000. And so can you talk a little bit about what has helped CAMFED scale up so successfully, and, you know, where your, you know, if you can weave into that as well, kind of your role as a leader and what you've been most excited about and what you're looking, you know, where you'll be focusing your time and energy in the coming years.
Absolutely. So first, what has helped CAMFED as an organization scale? I mean, it's been a number of things. There's no one ingredient, and I think that's what again makes us kind of more than an organization, but a movement. And so the fact that first and foremost, yeah, the CAMFED Association has been able to thrive and grow has been critical to that. So being able to invest in that network, and as I said, ensure that young women as they come through school are able to stay connected with each other and that they see value in that. I mean, speaking to an alumni network here, you all must see value that you get out of the Global Women's Empowerment Group. And we really believe that CAMFED Association members need to see the value of staying connected with us. And so that's through those post-school opportunities that I mentioned, being able to continue to support them into higher education, with business training, with business capital, with other networking opportunities, so that they continue to benefit. And then what it does is it really just unlocks that philanthropy and that activism for the next generation, because we often get the question of like whether we're prescriptive or if there's some requirement, for example, that that CAMFED Association members give back, and there never has been. It's just what women do, you know, and so we're there to almost like supercharge what naturally takes place. And so that's been at the heart of our scale. And then partnerships with donors. Globally, we have institutional partners, government partners, individuals who support our work. So we're always looking to really grow the range of partners that are coming together and coming behind girls' education and young women's leadership. And that's been critical to being able to scale. And I think what's been so important about those partnerships has been people who are willing to invest long-term, because we invest long-term. So the fact that CAMFED's model demands that we support a girl through her secondary education means that we need partners who are going to be there with us, because we can't start supporting a girl in 8th grade and hope that we're going to have the funding to see her through. So it's a complicated model, but once donors and partners really see the impact that it's having, they're willing to go long-term with us as well, which has been critical. And then in terms of my role, you know, what I've learned over the years is that everyone has their place in this movement, and that my job is to help people find their place in this movement. Because of course it's so straightforward to see where a CAMFED Association member fits in, because she's at the heart of the model. She's why we exist, and she's leading the work in her family, you know, because she's in a completely different position than she might have been if she hadn't gone to school, in terms of decision making, in terms of being able to contribute to the income of the family, and really improve its circumstances. She's important in her community. She's important in the network, in her country. But helping people, you know, around the world see how they can be part of this movement for girls' education, why it's important to all of us, you know, because as I mentioned at the beginning, this is having an impact on these broader issues that we all want to help solve. And so even though it may seem far away, supporting a girl through school in Africa is not only a matter of justice, but it can actually have an impact on all of our lives and our world. And so, yeah, whatever that angle might be, there's a place for all of us. And so I just see my role as helping people see where their place is.
I love that. It sounds like you've identified yourself as a learner guide of sorts. And I think that's something really important to highlight for the group, how there is what we can contribute, but there is also helping others. I loved what you said about helping others find their pathway, helping others find where they can be both inspired and, you know, excited about what they're doing, but also helping others to find that same joy and inspiration and energy, because sometimes this work can be difficult. So I love that. And also want to highlight your point about the lasting peer connections, networks, and relationships, and the commitment to long-term support in a community by creating these networks that live and breathe beyond what you're able to provide, you know, to a girl in 8th grade and, you know, in the subsequent years. That really is a lifelong set of relationships, and how important that is to transformational change, that it's not starting and completing a program, but building a model that supports these lifelong connections. So really excited that that is part of your work, and to learn more about that. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for this inspirational conversation. And I want to turn it over to Anna Budazova, who is Vice Chair of GlobalWE Connect, to take some questions from the audience. Thank you so much, Brooke.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much. It's been really exciting to hear that everybody has a place, and we can find strategies to help people find their place in this work. So we have a couple of questions, and the first one is, how do you advise international women's empowerment NGOs, so other NGOs who want to fundraise in the US?
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously, yeah, that's my wheelhouse. So, I think one thing that we've learned is kind of what I've been trying to do, which is making it relevant to the issues that they care about. Because yeah, if girls' education in Africa is not on someone's kind of philanthropic radar initially, it can seem like a long stretch to convince them why they should care and invest in this issue when there might be so many pressing issues, including domestically, of course, for women, which I know we'll all be keenly feeling. And so, so I think making it relevant and proximate is something that we've really focused on. So relevant in terms of those broader issues that I mentioned, talking about the connection to climate action, talking about the connection to social justice, and proximate. It's interesting because COVID has in some ways helped in that regard because, there's a small number of donors that can actually come and see the work directly. And the investment, of course, by our teams in Africa to be able to support that is significant. And so because people have gotten used to working in the virtual world over COVID, we've been able to connect more and more young women leaders from the CAMFED Association, staff members, with our community of donors. And we've really seen a fantastic response to that. So I think creating opportunities, to bring the work closer is always key. And things like the CNN feature that I showed, when they can travel out and visit schools and things, that's incredible. And that's kind of the, prime example, but there's other ways to do it as well. And we've been exploiting those ourselves.
Well, would like to follow up with you as well, maybe in 6 months or in a year, about the strategies. I think our members would be very interested, and we're still on the, I think folks here are still interested on this partnerships that you mentioned and how to build those partnerships. So let's move to governments. Estera is asking a question about what are some of the how does CAMFED get their vision and mission across to governments? So if, especially as the first very hard step to start this cooperation.
Yeah, so the first MOU with the Ministry of Education in Zimbabwe in 1993, is quite a ways back, but really, again, it came, I think, with that idea that we were there to partner. And I think one thing that was critical at the outset for CAMFED was that we registered in Zimbabwe as a local organization and in the UK as CAMFED International at the same time. So even from the very beginning, as an organization, we were demonstrating that we were a local organization, that we were going to be working directly in that country, and that we weren't some kind of a top-down operation. So one thing that I haven't mentioned, which I should have, is the fact that we don't have any expatriate staff. So CAMFED's teams in Africa are entirely made up of nationals of the countries where they work. And I think that has been critical as well, again, to really show that we're an organization that's working in that country, led by professionals from that country, and now led by educated young women who have come through the program. So our executive director in Tanzania, for example, is a CAMFED association member. As I mentioned, Angie, of course, leading the work globally, is a CAMFED association member. So I think that's been critical in terms of those partnerships. And then as we've expanded and been invited into additional countries, it's been because of how they've seen how we work in other countries. And so, for example, we were next invited into Zambia by the woman who was the permanent secretary for the Ministry of Education at that time. because she had seen what those partnerships look like in Zimbabwe. So it's that peer-to-peer model that's really been critical as well. It's not CAMFED coming as an organization, but it's been peers in the ministries, peers at the teacher level, peers at the community or traditional leader level who have led the expansion of our work into new countries. And I think that's been really important.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it in your presentation, but at what age do you begin targeting girls?
So we do support children at primary school level, but we kind of the core of our model is focused on secondary school because that's where the drop off happens. So over the years where we've been working, the parity between boys and girls at primary school level has improved significantly. And but it's at secondary school level where girls are most excluded and where you get the greatest benefit. So secondary is really the kind of core of our investment.
And what if the government where you want to expand to, or in the past, start asking you questions about like how would you maintain a balance with boys' education? Because they're going to be talking about, let's say, the government will ask you that we have seen or we have observed some sort of neglect for boys as well, and they would be wondering, like, as you come in at primary or secondary education, how would you maintain a balance with that?
Absolutely, and we do get that question a lot in terms of what about boys or what about partnering with men? And the answer is that we do support vulnerable boys, particularly at the primary school level, because we do recognize, of course, that that there are children, who need support, both boys and girls. And then we do focus on girls because they're the most excluded. But as I mentioned, so much of our work in terms of the learner guides, in terms of the teacher mentors that CAMFED trains, in terms of kind of the systemic impact that we have is benefiting boys as well. And we have been able to see the impact on them, on the wider school population. So we really do believe that, we're having that impact by specifically targeting the most excluded.
Brooke, this has been fascinating, and our audience wants to also know a little details about you personally. So I hope it's okay. But one of the question is, you mentioned you have background in anthropology. So Angelina is wondering, is it helpful for you to have, so is this background in anthropology helpful for you to run the organization? You're running this huge organization.
I saw that question. I was thinking about it. I think it has been because it's about, first of all, it's about people, right? It's about understanding people and cultures. And, but I think most importantly, what it brought me to girls' education as the biggest impact I could have. Because as I think was mentioned at the beginning, I was doing research in the Gambia on child growth stunting. And so I was looking kind of more from a health perspective. But what I was seeing was that the children who had mothers who had gone further in school were physically healthier. Like you could just see it right there with your own eyes, right? That they were thriving. Whereas children who had mothers who hadn't had the opportunity to go to school because of poverty were the ones who were struggling. And so that's kind of how it brought me to this work, was this idea that where can you have the biggest impact? And it is in ensuring that girls have the opportunity to go to school, and it lasts a lifetime, and it then impacts the next generation. So that's kind of, how I consider my background, having supported my work today.
And how was it for you personally to navigate the corporate environments, based on what you know so far, and based on, let's say, when you were just getting started? What are some maybe advice you could give to your younger self, or to somebody who is just getting started navigating this environments? And we know corporate environments can be hard to navigate for everybody, but especially for those who identify as women, or who struggle a little bit to bringing, for other reasons, to bring their whole self to this corporate environment.
I think what it would be, I took so much inspiration from our clients, and from girls and the women that we serve. And I've almost like grown up, because I've been at CAMFED for so long, for 18 years, I've kind of grown up together with, as a professional with the young women themselves. And I see the ambition that they have, and I see the goals that they set, and they're so lofty, you know, and needless to say, they've had significant challenges that I never had to face in my life. And so I would just say to just be ambitious, to be not just ambitious for yourself, because that's not really what I'm talking about, but ambitious for like what can be achieved, and to not then be afraid to go out and kind of communicate that ambition to others. Because yeah, I think I've had more and more success in my role, especially in terms of partnerships and fundraising, when I really just had that confidence to tell the story about what we're achieving and about what incredible young women are leading the organization, and to not hold back in that respect, because the young women of the CAMFED Association are not holding back in their lives or their communities. And so the least I can do is match that myself. So that's what I've learned.
Well, I've only, we have 2 more minutes, so I only have time for one more question. So I'm going to try to combine one question into 2 and then have concluding remarks. So at the, if we think about, if we shift the locus of control a little bit towards big picture and root causes of some of the problems you mentioned, including some of the institutional challenges that you are facing, for example, safety concerns and commuting to schools, or lack of menstrual care or health concerns, is there institutional point of focus for CAMFED, and how is these issues, how do you approach this locally?
In terms of kind of root cause?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. So that's what we recognized from the beginning, is that if you follow all these issues to their core, it's poverty. So I think when we first started working, there was a lot more of an idea that it was kind of a cultural issue, that you needed to convince families to send their girls to school. But it's an issue of poverty, and there might be a decision made at the family level to support the boy rather than the girl, but it's because there's a limited number of resources, and the boy had a better opportunity for, you know, paid work after school. And so if you can address those issues rooted in poverty, you can address so much of this. And I was together with Angeline in May, and she was talking about the fact that even at the government level, you know, when you're talking about resources and they're talking about selection criteria, she said, you know, that's poverty talking. Like, ultimately, it's because there's a limited amount of resources. And so it comes out in so many different ways, but if we can address those root issues around poverty, you know, then the other things, child marriage, you know, exclusion from education, gender inequality, can really be solved as well. And so that's why, first and foremost, we do believe in removing those financial barriers that girls face in going to school, as well as the social support.
Brooke, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank also our audience for joining us today, for being active. And we were able to have this fascinating discussion with Brooke, where we're really very grateful to you, Brooke, and CAMFED USA for participating in our 3rd Fireside Chat. Sajida, thanks for welcoming us. And Wendy, thank you so much for moderating the discussion. As always, we greatly appreciate also our GlobalWE board and Connect team for making the event possible. A special thanks to Brandon. Brandon, where are you? Thank you for running the Zoom meeting, and Barbara, who helped organize this event and make it happen. So if you're not a member of GlobalWE, and if you'd like to continue coming to our events and becoming a member, it's free. You can visit our website, become a member. If you're not a Harvard affiliate or anything like that, you can become a friend of GlobalWE. That's totally fine as well. I post some info in the chat if you'd like to get connected with the Connect team, no pun intended. We're always looking for new members to join our team and help make more events like this possible. You can also support our work by visiting GlobalWE website and click on donate button. I also added some links to the chat. I'd like to just ask everybody to keep coming to our events. Thank you all for participation and see you at our next event.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, everybody. Stay well.